Kara Bennett checked her reflection in the bathroom mirror one last time before her shift started. The black button-down shirt and slacks were freshly pressed, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She practiced her smile, the one she'd wear for the next 8 hours straight, no matter how tired her feet got or how rude some customers might be. At 28 years old, she'd gotten pretty good at hiding what was really going on inside. The evening shift at Bella Vista was about to begin, and Friday nights were always crazy. The restaurant sat in the heart of downtown Chicago, where business people celebrated deals over expensive wine and couples marked anniversaries with candlelit pasta dishes. Kara had been working here for almost 3 years now, long enough that she could recite the specials in her sleep, and knew exactly which tables tipped well and which ones would run her. Back and forth for extra Parmesan cheese. She pushed through the swinging kitchen doors and tied her apron around her waist. The familiar sounds of the restaurant surrounded her clattering dishes, the head chef yelling in Italian, the soft jazz music playing through the speakers. To most people, this was just another Friday night. But for Kara, every shift felt like a reminder of the life she wasn't living. "Hey, you ready for tonight?" Tony, the manager, called out from behind the bar. He was a stocky man in his 50s with a thick Chicago accent and a heart bigger than his tough exterior let on. He'd given Kara a chance when she needed it most, never asking too many questions about why she needed flexible hours or why she sometimes showed up looking exhausted from late-night rehearsals that led nowhere. "Always ready," Kara replied. Flashing that practiced smile, Tony knew her well enough to see through it, but he didn't push. That was one of the things she appreciated about him. He treated his staff with respect, paid them fairly, and didn't pry into their personal lives. In return, Kara worked harder than almost anyone else on the floor. She never called in sick, never complained about difficult tables, and somehow made every customer feel like they were the most important person in the room. What Tony didn't know, what nobody at Bella Vista knew, was that during the day, Kara was someone completely different. Or at least she was trying to be. Every morning she woke up at 6 and went through the same routine. Vocal warm-ups in her tiny studio apartment, careful not to disturb the neighbors. Reviewing scripts and sheet music over coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Checking her email obsessively for callbacks that rarely came. Then she'd put on whatever outfit seemed right for that day's audition and head out into the city, carrying hope in her chest and headshots in her bag. The auditions were the hardest part. Not the performing itself, Kara loved that. It was the waiting rooms filled with dozens of other talented people, all wanting the same role. It was the quick thank you next from casting directors who'd already made up their minds. It was the rejection emails that tried to soften the blow with words like tremendous talent and not quite the right fit this time. Last month alone, she'd auditioned for 3 different shows, a revival of a classic musical downtown, a small role in a contemporary play at one of the neighborhood theaters, even a commercial for a local car dealership, which felt like admitting defeat but would have paid her rent for 2 months. She didn't get any of them. Her bank account was running on fumes. The number got smaller every month, no matter how many shifts she picked up. Acting classes cost money. New headshots cost money. Even the train fare to auditions added up. Sometimes Kara did the math in her head while serving tables. How many plates of fettuccine alfredo equaled 1 month's rent? How many bottles of wine sold meant she could afford new shoes for an audition? The dream was supposed to be different. When she'd moved to Chicago 5 years ago, fresh out of college with a theater degree and stars in her eyes, she'd imagined it would take maybe a year or 2 to break through. She had talent, her professors had told her so. She had drive. She had passion. But the city was full of talented, driven, passionate people, all fighting for the same tiny opportunities. Her mom still called every Sunday asking the same careful questions. "How's the restaurant?" instead of "How's the acting going?" Because they both knew the answer to the second question would just make everyone feel sad. Her friends from college had mostly given up on their artistic dreams by now. One was teaching high school drama. Another worked in marketing. A third had moved back home to Tennessee and got married. They were happy, or at least they seemed happy on social media. Sometimes Kara wondered if she should give up too. Get a real job with benefits and a 401k, stop living on this exhausting tightrope between two worlds. But every time she seriously considered it, something inside her refused. Not yet? Not quite yet. She grabbed her notepad and pen and headed to her section. The restaurant was already filling up with the early dinner crowd. Couples holding hands across tables. Groups of friends laughing over appetizers. Business types in expensive suits barely looking up from their phones. Kara moved between them with practiced ease, taking orders and delivering drinks, keeping that smile fixed on her face. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" she asked a table of 4 who were studying their menus intently. "What do you recommend?" One of them asked, not looking up. Kara launched into her script about the wine selection, pointing out the specials, making small talk that felt genuine even though she'd had this exact conversation 1,000 times before. This was the other performance she'd mastered, playing the role of the cheerful, attentive server who loved her job and had no other ambitions beyond making sure your dinner was perfect. The truth was, she'd gotten so good at this role that sometimes she forgot where the character ended and the real Kara began. When she was on the restaurant floor, she became someone else entirely. Someone who didn't have dreams too big for her paycheck. Someone who wasn't constantly disappointed. Someone who was content with exactly where she was in life, but then her shift would end. She'd count her tips, change out of her uniform, and walk out into the Chicago night. And on the train ride home, staring at her reflection in the dark window, she'd feel it all come flooding back, the hunger, the frustration, the desperate hope that tomorrow might be different. Tonight felt like every other Friday night as Kara moved from table to table. She had no idea that in a few hours everything would change. She didn't know that table 12 would be reserved under a name that would make her heart sink. She couldn't imagine that this ordinary shift would turn into the night she'd been waiting for her entire life. For now, she was just a waitress at an Italian restaurant in Chicago, serving dinner to people who barely saw her. Just another person carrying invisible dreams while balancing plates of pasta. Just Kara, waiting for her chance and trying not to lose hope that it would ever come. The dinner rush was in full swing when Tony approached Kara with the reservation list. He had that apologetic look on his face that she'd learned to recognize over the years. "I need you to take table 12, he said, wincing slightly. "I know it's by the window and the acoustics are terrible there, but you're the only one I trust with it." Kara glanced at the corner table. It was notorious among the serving staff. Located right next to the street-facing windows, it caught every sound from the kitchen, every conversation from nearby tables, and somehow managed to be both drafty and stuffy at the same time. It was also the table where difficult customers seemed to end up, as if the universe had a sense of humor about these things. "What's the name?" she asked, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Tony checked his notes. "Party of 4 under Douglas Brennan." The name didn't mean anything to Kara, so she nodded and headed toward the table with menus in hand. She wove through the crowded restaurant, dodging other servers and navigating around chairs that stuck out into the walkway. The dinner crowd was loud tonight, filled with weekend energy and wine-fueled laughter. As she approached table 12, she could already hear them. 4 people, all dressed in black like they'd come from a funeral or some kind of formal event. 3 men and 1 woman, all probably in their 50s or 60s, talking over each other in that way people do when they're not really listening to anyone but themselves. "Good evening," Kara said, putting on her warmest smile. "Welcome to Bella Vista. My name is Kara, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." One of the men looked up at her. He had silver hair combed back from his forehead and wore glasses with thick black frames that somehow managed to look both expensive and pretentious. His eyes were sharp, calculating, the kind that seemed to be judging everything they landed on. "Finally," he said, though they'd only been seated for maybe 2 minutes. "We've had the longest evening and we're absolutely starving." "Of course. Can I start you with something to drink while you look over the menu?" The woman ordered a glass of red wine without specifying which one, leaving Kara to make the choice. One of the other men wanted a martini, very dry, with olives. specifying the exact brand of vodka in a tone that suggested the restaurant would probably get it wrong. The third man ordered sparkling water, extra ice with lemon not lime, served in a wine glass not a water glass, and the silver-haired man Douglas Brennan ordered a scotch, neat, and then immediately launched back into the conversation he'd been having as if Kara had already disappeared. The whole production was an absolute disaster, he was saying to his companions. I don't know who told that director he had any business interpreting Sondheim, but they should be held accountable. Kara felt her stomach tighten. She recognized that tone, that particular brand of criticism that went beyond disliking something into genuine contempt as she walked away to put in the drink order. Pieces of their conversation drifted after her, theater critics. Of course they were theater critics. She should have guessed from the all-black clothing, from the way they carried themselves, from that specific kind of intellectual superiority that hung around them like cologne. Chicago had plenty of critics, but something about this group felt different. More established. More powerful. When she returned with their drinks. Carefully placing each one according to their exact specifications, they barely acknowledged her. They were deep in discussion about a musical that had just opened at one of the downtown theaters. The lead couldn't carry a tune in a bucket, the woman was saying, shaking her head. And the choreography looked like something from a high school production. That's generous, Douglas added. I've seen better dancing at wedding receptions. The table erupted in laughter. Kara stood there, notepad ready, waiting for them to notice she existed. It took almost a full minute. Oh, right, Douglas said, glancing at her like he'd forgotten she was human. We'll need a few more minutes with the menu. Of course. Take your time. But she could feel her hands shaking slightly as she walked away. These people held careers in their hands. They decided which shows lived and which ones died. One bad review from someone like Douglas Brennan could close a production before it even found its audience. And here they were, casually destroying someone's work over cocktails, laughing about it like it was all just a game. Kara tried to focus on her other tables. A young couple celebrating an anniversary who were sweet and easy to please. A family with 2 kids who were surprisingly well behaved. A group of women who seemed to be having some kind of reunion, talking over each other in the best possible way. Full of joy and old stories, but she kept getting pulled back to table 12 when she returned to take their food order. They'd moved on from that evening's show to complaining about the state of theater in Chicago in general. The problem, Douglas was saying, gesturing with his scotch glass, is that everyone thinks they're talented these days. Everyone with a dream and a diploma thinks they can make it on stage. Social media has made it worse, the woman agreed. Now every aspiring actress with an Instagram account thinks they're one viral video away from Broadway. Kara felt her face getting hot. She stood there, pen hovering over her notepad, trying to keep her expression neutral. The truth is, Douglas continued, 99% of these so-called artists are just wasting everyone's time. They should get real jobs and stop cluttering up audition rooms. What's the special tonight? The woman asked Kara, as if she hadn't just been part of a conversation dismissing the dreams of thousands of people. Kara's voice came out, steadier than she felt. We have a pan-seared sea bass with roasted vegetables and a lemon butter sauce. And our chef has also prepared a special risotto with wild mushrooms and truffle oil. I'll have the sea bass, Douglas said. And make sure it's actually seared, not just warmed up. The last time I was here, the fish was practically raw. Kara bit the inside of her cheek. She'd worked at Bella Vista for 3 years, and their fish was always cooked perfectly. But she just nodded and wrote it down as she took the rest of their orders, listening to their increasingly specific demands and modifications. She felt something building inside her chest. It wasn't quite anger, though there was some of that. It was more like a kind of desperate frustration that she'd been carrying for so long it had become part of her. These people had no idea what it was like. They sat in their comfortable chairs with their expense accounts and their power to destroy people's dreams with a few hundred words, and they acted like it was all so easy. Like wanting to create art was some kind of character flaw. Like struggling to make it meant you didn't deserve to make it at all. When she returned to the kitchen, her hands were still shaking. The head chef, Mario, noticed. "You okay, Kara?" "Yeah," she lied. "Just a difficult table? Table 12? How'd you guess?" Mario laughed. "That table is cursed. I swear to God, every impossible person ends up sitting there." Kara managed to smile, but her mind was somewhere else. She was thinking about her audition next Tuesday for a small theater company on the North Side. She'd been preparing for weeks, had the monologue memorized so well she could recite it backwards. It probably wouldn't lead to anything, just like all the others. But she'd keep trying anyway, because what else could she do? Give up and prove people like Douglas Brennan right? The evening crawled forward. Table 12 sent back the sea bass once because it was too seared, even though Douglas had specifically asked for it to be well seared. They complained about the temperature of the restaurant, the noise level, the spacing of the tables. Through it all, Kara maintained her composure, apologizing for things that weren't her fault, fixing problems that didn't really exist, and all the while they kept talking about the terrible state of theater, about talentless wannabes, about how the real artists had all died out and been replaced by amateurs with delusions of grandeur. Kara delivered their entrees, refilled their drinks, brought them dessert menus. She smiled until her face hurt, and something inside her started to crack, just a little bit, because she was tired, so incredibly tired of being invisible to people who held all the power. Tired of serving people who looked right through her while discussing exactly why people like her would never make it. She had no idea that in a few minutes everything was about to change, that her invisibility was about to end in the most unexpected way possible. That table 12, cursed as it was about to become the stage for the performance of her life. Dessert service was when everything fell apart. Kara approached table 12 with a tray of tiramisu and panna cotta, mentally preparing herself for whatever complaint would come next. The 4 critics had moved from wine to after-dinner drinks, and their voices had gotten louder with each round. The whole restaurant could hear them now, though most people were politely pretending not to listen. "Remember when this place used to have live music on weekends?" the woman was saying, scraping her spoon along the edge of her dessert plate. "That was years ago, before they realized entertainment was a waste of money." Douglas laughed, the sound sharp and condescending. "Entertainment? Is that what we're calling it?" I remember those performances. Local talent trying desperately to be discovered while people were just trying to eat their pasta in peace. "You're being cruel." "Douglas," one of the other men said, but he was smiling when he said it. Like cruelty was just part of Douglas's charm. "I'm being honest," Douglas corrected. "The city is drowning in mediocrity. Everyone wants to be a star, but nobody wants to put in the actual work. They think showing up with a dream is enough." Kara set down the desserts carefully, one by one. Her hand trembled slightly as she placed the tiramisu in front of Douglas. She could feel her professional mask starting to slip, that smile she'd worn for hours beginning to crack at the edges. "Will there be anything else?" she asked, proud that her voice came out steady. "Just the check eventually," Douglas said, not looking at her. "No rush, though. The night is still young and the company is tolerable." His companions laughed. Kara nodded and turned to leave, but then Douglas said something that stopped her in her tracks. "Case in point," he gestured vaguely around the restaurant. "I'm sure half the staff here are aspiring somethings or other. Actors waiting tables, musicians serving drinks. All of them thinking they're just one lucky break away from making it. It's almost sad how predictable it is." The words hit Kara like a physical blow. For 3 years, she'd been invisible in this restaurant. Just a waitress, just part of the scenery. And now suddenly she was visible, but only as an example of failure. A cautionary tale about wasted dreams. Something inside her snapped. She turned back around. "Excuse me?" Douglas looked up, surprised. Apparently waitresses weren't supposed to talk back. "Did you need something?" he asked, his tone suggesting she was interrupting something important. "Actually," Kara heard herself saying, "I did want to mention something. Some of us who are working these jobs while pursuing our dreams are doing exactly what you said. We're putting in the work." We show up at auditions even after being rejected dozens of times. We take classes we can barely afford. We practice until our voices give out or our feet bleed. We don't have the luxury of trust funds or safety nets, so we work two lives at once, and neither one of them is easy. The table had gone quiet. The neighboring tables, too. Kara could feel eyes on her from all over the restaurant, but she couldn't stop now. The words were pouring out after being held back for too long. You sit here in your expensive clothes, judging people you don't know anything about, deciding who deserves a chance and who doesn't, and you act like it's all so simple. Like wanting something badly enough means you're delusional. But some of us don't have a choice. We have to believe in ourselves because nobody else will. Douglas stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly a smile spread across his face. It wasn't a kind smile. "Well," he said, setting down his fork. "Looks like I struck a nerve. Let me guess, aspiring actress?" Kara's face burned, but she lifted her chin. "Yes, of course you are." Douglas leaned back in his chair, studying her like she was something curious under a microscope. "Tell me, how many auditions have you been on? How many callbacks? Any actual roles, or are you still in the dreaming phase?" "That's none of your business." "You made it my business when you interrupted my dinner with your little speech." He turned to his companions. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. Everyone thinks they're special. Everyone thinks their struggle is unique. But talent doesn't care about your work ethic or your dreams. Either you have it or you don't." The woman at the table touched Douglas's arm. "Maybe we should—" No, Douglas interrupted. "I think this is fascinating. Our waitress here clearly thinks I'm wrong about the state of local talent. She thinks I'm being too harsh in my assessments." He looked directly at Kara, and there was something cruel in his eyes. Something that enjoyed watching people squirm. "Tell you what," he said. "Let's make this interesting. You say you're talented, that you're putting in all this work. Prove it." Kara's heart started pounding. "What? Sing something. Right now?" "Right here." Douglas gestured around the restaurant. "You said you're an actress. So act, perform, show me I'm wrong about you being just another dreamer wasting everyone's time." The restaurant had gone completely silent. Kara could hear the blood rushing in her ears. "And if I do?" "If you're actually good, and I mean genuinely talented, not just adequate, I'll pay for my entire table's meal. More than that, I'll write about you. I have connections all over this city. One word from me could open doors you've been beating your head against for years. And if I'm not good enough for your standards?" Douglas smiled wider. "Then you admit it. Admit that maybe you're exactly what I said, another person with a dream and no real talent to back it up. Admit that maybe it's time to accept reality and stop wasting your time." Kara felt like she might throw up. This was insane. She was in her work uniform, in the middle of a crowded restaurant, being challenged by one of the most powerful critics in Chicago to perform on the spot. Without preparation, without accompaniment, without anything but her voice and whatever courage she could. Scraped together, every logical part of her brain screamed at her to walk away. To apologize, to laugh it off, to finish her shift and forget this ever happened. Douglas Brennan was setting her up to fail, and she knew it. He wanted to humiliate her, to prove his point about delusional dreamers, but there was another voice in her head, quieter but more insistent. This was the chance she'd been waiting for. Not the way she'd imagined it, not the way she'd wanted it, but a chance nonetheless. Douglas had an audience of his own powerful people who could actually make things happen. And beyond that, she had an audience of regular people, fellow dreamers working in restaurants and offices and warehouses, all of them wondering if their dreams were foolish too. She thought about her empty bank account, about the rejection emails, about her mother's careful questions every Sunday, about the voice inside her that kept saying, "Not yet, not quite yet," every time she considered giving up. "One song," Kara said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Douglas raised his eyebrows. "You're actually going to do this? One song? And when I'm done, you keep your word." "Oh, I always keep my word, sweetheart. The question is whether you'll be able to keep yours." Kara looked around the restaurant. Tony had emerged from the kitchen, his face a mixture of concern and confusion. The other servers had stopped moving. Every customer was watching, their meals forgotten. It was like someone had hit pause on the entire world, thought this was crazy. This was professional suicide. This was everything her practical mind told her not to do, but her heart was pounding with something that felt like electricity, like possibility, like the moment right before you jump off the high dive when you're terrified and exhilarated all at once. "Give me 1 minute," she said to Douglas. She walked toward the kitchen on legs that felt disconnected from her body. Tony met her halfway. "Kara, you don't have to do this," he said quietly. "That guy's a jerk. Just finish your shift and forget about him." But Kara shook her head. "I do have to do this, Tony. I can't explain it, but I do." She stepped into the kitchen, past the curious stares of the cooking staff, past Mario, who looked completely bewildered. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to press them against the cool metal of the prep counter. 1 minute. She had 1 minute to choose a song that could change her life or confirm her worst fears about herself. 1 minute to decide who she was and what she was capable of. 1 minute to either prove Douglas Brennan wrong or prove him devastatingly, humiliatingly right. Kara closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then she knew exactly what she had to sing. It was risky, maybe even reckless. But if she was going to do this, she was going to do it all the way. She walked back out into the dining room, and every eye in the place locked onto her. The walk from the kitchen back to the dining room felt like it took forever and no time at all. Kara's heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. Every eye in Bella Vista was on her. The business people who'd been checking their phones. The anniversary couple who'd been lost in each other's eyes. The family with kids who should have left an hour ago, but were still picking at dessert. Even the kitchen staff had crowded around the door to watch. This was really happening. Douglas sat at table 12 with his arms crossed, that smug smile still on his face. He looked like a man who'd already won, who was just waiting for the inevitable confirmation of what he already believed. His 3 companions seemed less certain, shifting in their seats, maybe starting to feel uncomfortable about what Douglas had set in motion. Kara stopped in the middle of the dining room, right between the tables where everyone could see her. She still wore her server's apron, her notepad stuffed in the pocket, her hair coming loose from its ponytail after hours of work. She didn't look like someone about to perform. She looked exactly like what she was, a tired waitress at the end of a long shift. For a second, she almost lost her nerve. The reality of what she was about to do crashed over her. She could still back out, laugh it off, tell Douglas he was right and she was just another dreamer, go back to serving tables and pretending that was enough. But then she caught Tony's eye. He stood by the kitchen door, and the look on his face wasn't pity or concern anymore. It was something else. Pride. Maybe belief, like he knew something about her that she'd forgotten about herself. Kara took a breath and let it out slowly. She untied her apron and set it on the nearest empty chair. Then she closed her eyes. The song she'd chosen was risky. It was an opera aria called Nessun Dorma, which meant none shall sleep in Italian. It was one of the most famous and most difficult pieces ever written. Opera singers trained for years to attempt it. The final high note alone had broken countless performers. It was bold and dramatic and absolutely insane to try without preparation, without a warm-up, without anything but raw courage. It was also the first aria she'd ever fallen in love with. She'd been 16, sitting in her high school music class, when her teacher played a recording of it. The power of it, the emotion, the way it built from quiet desperation to triumphant victory, it had made her cry right there at her desk. That was the moment she'd known she wanted to perform. Not just sing in the shower or hum along to the radio, but really perform. To make people feel what she'd felt that day. The restaurant was so quiet, she could hear the ice settling in people's water glasses. Kara opened her mouth and began to sing. The first notes came out soft, almost fragile. The opening of Nessun Dorma wasn't meant to be loud. It was meant to be vulnerable, uncertain, like a person alone in the darkness hoping for dawn. Her voice filled the space with a haunting beauty that made people stop breathing. She sang in Italian, the words flowing out of her like they'd been waiting there all along. She didn't translate them for the audience, but somehow everyone understood. The melody told the story of struggle, of hope, of refusing to give up even when everything seemed impossible. As she moved through the aria, her voice grew stronger. The quiet desperation gave way to determination. She wasn't thinking about Douglas anymore, or the challenge, or what would happen when she finished. She was inside the music, letting it move through her like electricity. The other servers had tears in their eyes. Mario, the tough-as-nails head chef, was gripping the doorframe like he needed it to stay upright. The anniversary couple had found each other's hands across the table. Even the kids at the family table sat completely still, mesmerized. Kara's voice soared higher, fuller, richer. Years of training that nobody knew about, hours of practice in her tiny apartment. Every audition that had ended in rejection, all of it poured into this moment. She'd been holding so much inside for so long, and now it was all coming out in the music. She hit the crescendo, her voice rising and rising, filling every corner of the restaurant. The chandelier seemed to vibrate with the sound. Wine glasses hummed on the tables. The power in her voice was shocking, almost impossible. Like something that shouldn't be able to come from a person? Especially not from a waitress in a wrinkled work shirt. And then came the famous line. The one even people who didn't know opera had heard before. Vincerò. She sang, the word meaning I will win. She sang it 3 times. Each one higher and more powerful than the last. Her voice climbing to notes that seemed to touch the ceiling and beyond. The final note rang out clear and perfect, holding impossibly long. Kara stood there with her eyes closed, her whole body vibrating with the effort and the emotion, and let the note carry until her breath finally ran out. Then silence. For 3 full seconds nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The entire restaurant existed in this frozen moment of absolute quiet, like the world itself was trying to process what it had just witnessed. Then someone started clapping. It was Tony, his rough hands coming together in sharp, decisive beats. Within a second, someone else joined. Then another. Then the whole restaurant erupted. People leaped to their feet. The standing ovation was instant and thunderous, filling the space where Kara's voice had just been. Grown men had tears streaming down their faces. Women were clutching their napkins to their eyes. The kitchen staff burst through the door, cheering and whistling. Even people passing by on the street outside had stopped, pressing their faces to the windows to see what was happening. Kara opened her eyes and the world rushed back in. Her legs felt shaky. Her hands were trembling. She looked around at all these people on their feet, clapping for her, crying for her, and felt something break open in her chest, some hard shell she'd been carrying for so long she'd forgotten it. Was there, but her eyes went to table. 12 Douglas's 3 companions were standing, applauding with everyone else. The woman had mascara running down her cheeks. One of the men looked stunned, like he'd just witnessed something that had fundamentally changed his understanding of the world. But Douglas himself sat perfectly still. For a moment, Kara's heart sank. He was going to find fault. Of course he was. He'd probably say her technique was off, or her breath control wasn't perfect, or 1,000 other things that would let him maintain his superiority. Then, very slowly, Douglas stood up. His face had changed completely. The smugness was gone. The cruel amusement had vanished. He looked like a different person, older somehow, and strangely vulnerable. His eyes were red, and Kara realized with shock that he was crying. He started to clap. Not the polite golf clap of someone being socially obligated. Real applause, hard and genuine. He clapped like he meant it, and he didn't stop, the restaurant noticed. The applause somehow got even louder. Douglas walked toward her, and the crowd parted to let him through. Kara stood frozen, not sure what was about to happen. When he reached her, he extended his hand. She took it, and his grip was firm and warm. "In 25 years?" Douglas said, his voice rough with emotion, "of reviewing performances in this city, I have never—" he paused, shaking his head. Never been so completely and utterly wrong about someone." He was still holding her hand, still looking at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You don't belong here," he said. Kara felt her heart drop. Even after everything, he was still going to. You belong on a real stage, Douglas continued. Not serving food, not waiting for someone to notice you. You belong where the whole city can hear that voice. He let go of her hand and pulled out his phone. Right there, in the middle of the restaurant, with everyone watching, he made a call. The dining room went quiet again, everyone straining to hear. Catherine, Douglas said into the phone. I know it's late. I don't care. I'm standing in front of someone you need to hear. Yes, right now. I'm sending you a video. Trust me on this. He turned to Kara. Sing it again. Just the last part. I need to record this. Kara was shaking all over now, but she nodded. With Douglas holding up his phone, with the entire restaurant watching, with everything she'd ever wanted suddenly feeling terrifyingly possible, she took a breath and she sang Vincero one more time. I will win. When she finished, Douglas was already typing on his phone, his fingers moving fast. He looked up at her and there was something new in his expression, respect, real, genuine respect. You just changed your life, he said quietly, so only she could hear. I hope you're ready for what comes next. The rest of that night passed in a blur that Kara would spend years trying to remember clearly. Customers kept approaching her, shaking her hand, hugging her, telling her they'd never forget what they'd just witnessed. The anniversary couple paid for her dinner break even though she hadn't eaten. The family with kids left her a $100 tip on a $60 check. Even the other servers were treating her differently. Like she'd transformed into someone else right before their eyes. Maybe she had. Douglas kept his word about the meal, paying for table 12 without even looking at the bill. But before he left, he pressed his business card into Kara's hand. Catherine Riley is the artistic director at the Lyric Opera, he said. I've sent her the video. She call you tomorrow, I guarantee it. When she does, don't downplay what you can do. Don't be humble. Just be exactly what you were tonight. His three companions apologized on their way out, looking genuinely embarrassed about their earlier conversation. The woman even hugged Kara, whispering, You were magnificent, before hurrying to catch up with the others after they left. Kara stood in the middle of the emptying restaurant, still trembling. Tony approached with a glass of water. Drink, he said. You look like you're going to pass out. Kara took the glass with shaking hands. Did that really just happen? It really just happened. Tony was grinning wider than she'd ever seen. In 3 years, you never told me you could sing like that. You never asked, fair point? He laughed. Listen, you still have side work to finish, but I think under the circumstances, we can skip it tonight. Go home, rest, process whatever the hell just happened. Kara wanted to argue, to insist on finishing her shift properly, but her legs felt like they might give out. She nodded, grabbed her things from her locker, and walked out into the Chicago night. The city looked different somehow. The same buildings, the same streets, the same late-night traffic. But Kara felt like she was seeing it all for the first time. Or maybe she was seeing it as herself for the first time. Not as someone pretending to be okay with a life that wasn't quite right. She took the train home, replaying the evening over and over in her mind. Had she really sung in front of a restaurant full of strangers? Had Douglas Brennan really cried? Had she actually just performed the most important song of her life while wearing her work clothes with marinara sauce on her sleeve? Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. This is Catherine Riley from the Lyric Opera. Douglas sent me your video. I'd like to meet with you Monday at 10 a.m. Please confirm you can make it. Kara read the message 3 times. Then she read it again. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely type a response. I'll be there. Thank you. She didn't sleep that night. How could she? Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the restaurant, felt the music moving through her, heard the applause. She kept expecting to wake up and find out it had all been a dream, but morning came and her phone was full of messages. Friends who'd somehow already heard about it. Her mom calling because someone had posted a video on social media and it was going viral. Even her old college roommate who she hadn't talked to in 2 years sent a message. Is this you? Holy hell, Kara. The video from the restaurant had been filmed by at least a dozen people. They'd all posted it online and it was spreading fast. Comments poured in from strangers around the world. Who is this woman? That voice. She needs to be on a real stage. Kara spent the weekend in a daze, practicing obsessively, terrified that Monday's meeting would somehow reveal that Friday night had been a fluke, that she couldn't actually sing like that it had been some kind of temporary magic that wouldn't come back. Monday morning arrived too fast and too slow. Kara stood outside the Lyric Opera building at 9:30, wearing the nicest outfit she owned, which wasn't saying much. Her stomach was doing BACKFLIPS. Catherine. Riley turned out to be a woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes and an air of someone who didn't waste time on nonsense. She led Kara into a rehearsal room with a piano. "Sing something for me," Catherine said without preamble. "Not the same piece from Friday?" "Something else." So Kara sang. And then Catherine asked her to sing something else. And then something else. 2 hours passed like minutes. Catherine made notes, asked questions about Kara's training, her experience, her goals. Finally, Catherine set down her pen. "You need work," she said bluntly. "Your technique is good, but not great. You have some bad habits that proper training will fix. Your breath control needs improvement." Kara's heart sank. Of course. It had been too good to be true. "However," Catherine continued, "you have something that can't be taught. That performance Friday night? That wasn't just technical skill. That was raw emotion, genuine passion, the ability to make people feel something. I've worked with singers who have perfect technique and zero soul. I'll take soul over perfection any day." She pulled out a folder. "We have an apprenticeship program. It's competitive, it's demanding, and it doesn't pay much. You'll work with our vocal coaches, learn from our performers, and if you prove yourself, you'll get small roles in productions. It's not a guarantee of stardom. It's a chance to develop your talent properly." Kara couldn't speak. She just nodded. "I'm offering you a position starting next month. Think about it and let me know by—" "Yes," Kara interrupted. "I don't need to think about it. Yes." Catherine smiled for the first time. "Good, I'll have the paperwork sent over. Welcome to the Lyric Opera, Kara." Walking out of that building, Kara had to sit down on the front steps because her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. She called her mom, and they both cried on the phone for 10 minutes straight. She called Tony, who yelled so loud she had to hold the phone away from her ear. She sat there on those steps and let herself feel it, all the joy and terror and disbelief and hope. The apprenticeship was everything Catherine promised. Demanding, exhausting, challenging in ways Kara hadn't imagined. But she worked harder than she'd ever worked in her life. She showed up early, stayed late, absorbed every piece of feedback like it was oxygen. She kept working at Bella Vista for the first few months, picking up shifts when she could. Tony understood, and the restaurant had become something of a local legend. People requested her section, hoping to hear her sing, though she explained she was saving her voice for actual performances now, 18 months after that Friday night. Kara made her debut in a supporting role in La Boheme. It wasn't the lead. It wasn't even a large part. But it was a real role on a real stage, and her name was in the program. Douglas Brennan was in the audience. She saw him in the third row during her entrance. After the show, he came backstage with flowers. "I told you that you belonged here," he said. "You also told me I was probably wasting everyone's time." "Well," Douglas smiled sheepishly, "I've been wrong before. Just never quite so spectacularly." 2 years after that, Kara sang the lead in a production that earned standing ovations every night for a month. The reviews were glowing. Douglas wrote one himself, and he kept a copy of it in her dressing room. Some performers have technique. Others have presence. Very rarely someone comes along who has both, plus that indefinable quality that makes you believe in magic. Kara Bennett is that rare artist. She doesn't just perform, she transforms. Sometimes, late at night after a performance, Kara thought about that Friday evening at Bella Vista, how close she'd come to walking away. How easily she could have let Douglas's challenge slide, finished her shift, gone home, and never known what might have been possible. She thought about all the other people out there, working jobs they'd never planned on, carrying dreams in their pockets, wondering if they should give up or keep going. She wished she could tell them all what she'd learned. That sometimes the moment you're ready to quit is exactly when you need to take the biggest risk of your life. That the chance you've been waiting for might not look like you imagined. It might show up as a challenge from someone who doesn't believe in you in the middle of your worst shift. When you're tired and frustrated and ready to give up, and that sometimes, just sometimes, betting everything on yourself pays off in ways you never could have. Dream.Cara kept a photo in her dressing room at the Lyric Opera. It was from that night at Bella Vista, taken by someone in the crowd on their phone. In it, she's standing in the middle of the restaurant, still wearing her apron, her eyes closed, her mouth open in song. She looked terrified and powerful and completely alive. She looked like someone who refused to let her dreams die quietly, like someone who had finally, after all those years of waiting and working and hoping, won.